What is going on, YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the third album by Davey Suicide. Basically, this album is called Made from Fire, and it came out in the spring of 2017. Now, I've reviewed a series of Davey Suicide albums. One was in the fall of last year when I reviewed Davey Suicide from 2013, and the other one was Worldwide Suicide, which I reviewed with Jackal Goldkick in like the spring of 2022. So I wanted to get to some more of these. It's been a while since Davey Suicide has dropped the project, and I'm hoping that they'll drop some more music soon enough as far as that kind of goes. But it's been since like the beginning of 2020, since before COVID had even really happened and that sort of thing. We'll have to see what kind of happens with them. But this is a pretty solid album. This is definitely something. This would have fit right in with the sort of stuff I was fucking with around late 2016 and early 2017, like Korn's The Serenity of Suffering and like Deuce's album that was going to come out later in 2017. Some of that type of stuff, Invincible, and some of those type moments. I would definitely kind of say there was just some good stuff back in like the late 2010s as far as metal kind of went. This is no exception. Both of the previous two Davey Suicide albums, I want to say I gave over a 9 out of 10. I want to say Davey Suicide, I don't remember what score I gave that album in the fall of 2022, but I think it was over an 8.5 or a 9 out of 10. And I do remember giving Worldwide Suicide a 10 out of 10. So I want to say that this one's definitely going to get a pretty rave score, and it definitely has a lot of good things to talk about. The thing about it is Davey Suicide does not really have an abundance of like wiki articles and biographies really about them. I had to look up on their actual website to be able to find out what the singles were from Made from Fire. There were four of them. We're going to get to some of those, but I just would have to kind of say in such that, Wikipedia does not really list like the singles from it. It says that at least Rise Above was a single, but it doesn't have any other ones kind of listed. So it's kind of the concept about it. It's pretty low key. I think these folks did at least get some radio singles as far as that kind of went, but I just would have to say and stuff, it just probably wasn't an overabundance. They're probably more low key, like In This Moment and like folks like that. I can't really think of some of them. Like they're probably just more low key, like folks like In This Moment and folks like that that just induce and some of those type folks that just didn't have like humongous radio singles like Metallica or Korn or Marilyn Manson or some of those type folks, but they still probably did chart. It's not to say this is a bad album. It definitely is. It's going to get over an 8.5 out of 10, but I just would have to say you look after just being able to say this is kind of low key. You have to kind of search for it. I do feel like the singles are at least some good starting points, but I would have to say all in all, I would recommend this album quite wholesomely. I just would have to say it's a good one. Like all three of the Davey Suicide albums did damage, but this is one that has some high profile guests on here. Twisted is on here and William Control's on here, which I kind of want to get used to the William Control song more. I don't recommend it as of this moment, but I would have to say I at least thought it was a stylish song to be able to say in some regard to that. But it's just kind of the concept. This does have some good guests on here to at least know that. It's kind of a spooky and kind of haunting album that feels just like the typical kind of autumn fare that a lot of folks kind of have in terms of like White Zombie and Rob Zombie and Marilyn Manson and like Korn and some of those type folks and Slipknot and some of that. So it's definitely one that fits within that fold. This is industrial metal, I would say. So this is very much up the alley if you like Rob Zombie and Power Man 5000 and Marilyn Manson and folks like that. There's some other bands. I can't really think of them as of this moment. There's some ones that came out like in late 2016, 2017 that I used to listen to that I just can't remember at this particular stage. Maybe I'll throw them in the video as far as when I remember them later, but I just would have to say that's kind of the instance behind it. But so we'll go ahead and talk about the singles. Basically, the lead single from this album is supposedly Rise Above. This is a crazed night venue boiler. I would say it's a crunk rave night with like some festive vibes and it's a pretty catchy single. This is like typical Davey Suicide. If you know most of their standard hooks, it's pretty good in that same sort of sense. It's just an easy kind of one. It's hooky, it's catchy. It really has that kind of affable feel about it. It's really surprising that some of these didn't do more damage, that they still continue to be low key. I mean, they were big enough to get features from Twisted and William Control, but that's still relatively kind of low key in that sort of sense. But this is just a good starting point for Davey Suicide. This is definitely one that I would recommend in terms of just like something that's not that ancient, at least from like 2017. It's only 6.5 years old. It's only like 6.5 years old. So I'd say this is a good radio jingle to kind of have just in terms of like that ghastly and kind of more haunting kind of appeal, but this works as like some good kind of creepy and kind of industrial metal. That's a good one. Too Many Freaks is another single, and this has Twisted on there. This is definitely a devilish nightclub hit. It's kind of got some claustrophobic rave energy, I would say, and it's good for outings, and it's a good crunk bop, I would definitely talk about. I like how this kind of turns into like electronic type sound when it gets to Twisted's part at the end, I would definitely say, as far as that kind of goes. But this is just kind of the thing about Davey Suicide on this album is they kind of have like some real kind of fierce energy, but they're pretty composed about doing it. This is definitely a devilish song on here, but it's not quite like Slipknot or Mushroom Head or like Attack type craziness, that sort of album. And it's within a relative fashion to kind of realize that you can get crazed enough to this, but it's not like 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 craziness. It's just composed enough to where you're not going to rip clothes and you're not going to really get carnivorous and that sort of concept as far as that kind of goes. But it is pretty freakish. I do like the concept of some of these. It's good ones. No Angels, another hit single. This is another nice one to kind of have. It's a simmering, slow groove nightclub jam. I would say it's a good dance cut with some glitzy spice. I would say about it. It's just a stock single. Definitely feel like this is a kind of simmering one. This one's kind of one that calms things down compared to Rise Above and Too Many Freaks. This one just doesn't have the same kind of energy, but this is just kind of like a kind of murky, kind of looming kind of cut just to kind of hang out in the club and just kind of appreciate the vibes, drinks in hand. You're not spilling your drinks in this particular song. It just has some good kind of just regular kind of stock and vanilla kind of rock nightclub kind of energy as far as that kind of goes. The sort of stuff like Rob Zombie usually gets a lot crazier than this, but it's just kind of the concept. If you like the feel of like a Rob Zombie or Marilyn Manson or Powerman 5000 type song, but just in kind of like a more nightclub, just kind of schmoozing kind of sense, this is a good example of that. Just would have to say it's pretty hooky, just these concepts behind it. The only single out of the four I didn't enjoy in some fashion was End of the War. And this is kind of one that's kind of very similar to the sort of stuff that Marilyn Manson did on like Hollywood and some of that type of stuff. This really kind of has like it's a power ballad, but it kind of has like these almost acoustic licks in here. It's just a very kind of light song. It's gloomy and dark and very haunting, but it kind of has like some acoustic in there. But I feel like the fashion and the composition for how that song turned out was just not quite catchy enough. I really feel like power ballads have to have like some sort of engagement towards it. This one just felt a lot more dreary and kind of sluggish than what I may have wanted. I mean, when you look after like a power ballad, it usually those are supposed to have more excitable kind of fanfare. There's a couple power ballads on here that just don't really capture that as well. I feel like another one that kind of didn't deliver quite as well in the power ballad sense was Paralyzed with William Control. But some of these, yeah, somehow these power ballads were just not quite as catchy. I mean, that's just kind of the concept about it. I was just probably expecting a little bit something more ferocious. I mean, I know power ballads are supposed to be more engaging, kind of wave your lighters in the sky type stuff as far as that kind of goes, but I just didn't see like the affability as far as the real relaxation towards it. I feel like they definitely had like some of these rave moments more stationed and definitely different variations of nightlife and as far as that kind of goes. But I just looked after it. The power ballads I just didn't quite connect with quite as well. But End of the War was one that was trying to do it, but I don't know. It's pretty much just I would say the instrumentation composition for how that just didn't turn out as well. It's kind of haunting. Both of the power ballads on here are pretty haunting. Do have that kind of glare about them, but I somehow the composition of them just didn't quite have the sheer execution I would have liked. But it's not to say it's going to detract from the score wholesomely. But so, all right, so to talk about like there's out of 13 songs, there's an intro on here which I don't recommend, but out of 13 songs on here, there's 9.5 that I wound up recommending. So those 9.5 songs out of 13 would be Rise Above, Too Many Freaks, Dancing with the Reaper, Devil's Night, No Angel, Torture, No Place Like Hell, The Chemical in You, Made from Fire, and the Almost song is Anti-System Revolution. Anti-System Revolution's the Almost song, and this is a decent one. It's some snappy event music, I would say. It's good for social and banter jive. Social and banter kind of jive for outings, and it's just not club music, but it is social. This is kind of something where you'd have it like an outdoor festival. This places cookouts, those sorts of things. It's places where you'd find food and barbecue and some of that type of stuff and live music, some of those type moments, just purchasing things, just trade places like that where you just would see that sort of stuff where there's just going to be a lot of people. And I look after it, like I like the socialness of the song, but it just didn't quite have the atmosphere behind it if you're not really trying to socialize. I mean, this is definitely a song if you're not being out and about and lively and social and some of those type moments, it just doesn't have the same effect towards it. Where if you're just in the car or something like that, it's not really nightclub music, but I just kind of feel like it's just more Anti-System Revolution is just a song where you're going to socialize and just kind of have more of an out and about kind of time. But I just look after, if you're not specifically kind of in that centered kind of mood, it just doesn't have the same centerpiece to really have that sort of energy. So it's just kind of one where it's kind of half and half. If you are stepping out and going to have some fun socially, it's good. But if you're not, if you're just trying to smoke or just have like a backyard party, some drink vibes, just house party kind of vibes as far as that kind of concern, it just doesn't, it just doesn't have as much appeal. So that's kind of thing. But one of the best songs on this album, I would say, is No Place Like Hell. This is a snappy rave hit. This is like a good dance gem, I would say. And it's a riveting kind of white zombie-like tune, I would say. And it's just a very good social cut. So there are some social cuts on here. I like the thing that I've noticed with Davey Suicides, they're a little bit more social. They're not so much just having these creeping kind of tunes. Like when you think of Korn or Slipknot, they're just kind of more either incorrigible and kind of destructive, or just kind of mosh type energy and just ferocious and just kind of leery kind of energy with some of those type ones, and more of like the industrial sense. This is actually the sort of stuff where you're going to get some dap and maybe have more than like a 5 or 10 minute conversation. I just feel like there's songs on here. Some of these songs are for the ladies. Like I feel like Torture Me and Too Many Freaks and some of these type ones just kind of, there's some songs for the ladies on here, like Too Many Freaks and songs like that. But I would have to say that there are some social moments on here that kind of have some of those vibes. Like I feel like Anti-System Revolution and Devil's Night and No Place Like Hell are just some good ones for those sorts of concepts as far as stepping out, as far as that kind of goes. But I just would look after, these are just some good moments, and No Place Like Hell is just a nice one. Torture Me is another kind of social one. This is definitely one for like some outdoor party vibes. Torture Me has some good outdoor party vibes, I would say. It's got some good evening fare with some snarling riffs, but it keeps relative composure. So there's just some good ones on here, like No Place Like Hell and Anti-System Revolution, for some good outdoor events. Like not all of these are like house party or nightclub in a sense. Some of these can just be outdoor kind of festival like. Like I definitely feel like Torture Me and Anti-System Revolution are a good 1-2 punch for just some outdoor kind of fare as far as that goes. Just summer heat. Not all of these are autumn music, but just kind of saying some outdoor kind of summer vibes and stuff like that. Barbecues and just places where there's going to be festivities and that sort of stuff. This is a good kind of fare for that. Devil's Night is some raving bar and pub music for a lively weekend thrive, I would say. It's crazy but presentable, and it's pretty radio ready. Like there's a lot of good songs on here that are pretty radio ready. Like I feel like No Place Like Hell is pretty radio ready. There's some ones like Torture Me that are pretty good with that. Devil's Night's a good example. Too Many Freaks, all four of the singles, and for the most part, all four of the singles really do that damage as far as being radio ready. So this is pretty, despite how low key this album kind of is, and despite maybe these singles not charting, there's just some good appeal about this particular album. But this is definitely, Devil's Night is definitely some bar and pub music. I feel like this is just for like a crazy night of just going to have some drinks. This is definitely like the drinking song of the album, I would say. This is just meant for kind of like a pounding night of just, I would definitely say the Devil's Night is like the pub and kind of shot glass kind of beer mug kind of song for the album. This is definitely one to kind of have for like some lively kind of indoor activity kind of energy as far as that kind of goes. It's not quite a dance club. It's not quite a dance club song. It's not quite a nightclub song, but it's definitely something just for being indoor events, that type stuff, as far as just having a pretty crazed and rave kind of time, just some good weekend kind of energy. Dancing with the Reaper is another similar one to Devil's Night. This is like a fierce night venue hit, I would say. It's an electro rave gem with some good riffs and crazed vibes on there. This is definitely one of the more crazed songs on here. Too Many Freaks, Rise Above. This, most of the first few songs that you hear have the most rave energy. They really kick off this album in a real nice way, I would say. I feel like maybe Devil's Night is more bar and pub music, but this is definitely, this is the sort of stuff that you would have heard just throughout like raves, and this is definitely something you would have heard throughout like raves and places like that throughout 96, 97. Just real similar to like White Zombie, that same kind of energy when you think of like Astro Creep. Definitely the same kind of energy when you think of Astro Creep 2000 and La Sexorcista from 1992, some of those type ones as far as that kind of goes. I think that's the name of that album, but just that same kind of pitch as far as that kind of goes. Dancing with the Reaper is just kind of a fierce song. Definitely some good energy. I still feel like some of these are more composed, but they do have enough craze about them to really get you excited and just kind of want to get some drinks in your system and dance a little bit and get some grooves going as far as that kind of goes. Chemical in You is definitely pretty essential. This is some ground level house party hit music. This is entry and initial icebreaker music for Shindig Fair. I would definitely kind of say just kind of one for more of like just the house party, just things kind of kicking off. I mean, there are some nightclub songs on here like Too Many Freaks, Rise Above, Dancing with the Reaper, and No Angel and some of those type ones, but this is definitely one for more of like a house local kind of shindig. There's not a ton of these on here. I probably could have used another song like The Chemical in You, but this one just kind of feels a lot more kind of personal and residential. I would definitely say this one's just a lot more kind of, there's a lot of social songs on this album. This is one that feels a lot more residential and kind of personal in that sort of sense. It's kind of good vibes to kind of get as far as like some good kind of local kind of shindigs as far as that kind of goes. This one, obviously, for like house party hits, and as far as that kind of goes, it's a good one, good energy. Made from Fire is another nice one. This is kind of like a techno bubbler. This kind of has a different variation of how the song kind of turns out. It starts off Made from Fire. The title track is another one that has a lot of good fanfare about it. This is one that starts off being like a techno bubbler, then it becomes more of like a shrill party kicker, I would say. This really has some good beat composition. This is an easy kind of house party cut, I would say, just like The Chemical and You. These are kind of some ones that are more local and residential, but I do feel like they do have some rave energy. So it's just good to kind of get the sheer kind of outing sense as far as this album kind of goes. They nail most of these executions real well. And this is the same thing. Davey Suicide is basically 3 for 3 with these albums, just being able to do it that many times. They're pretty crazed. They definitely are like a lighter. I mean, they have the same composition as Marilyn Manson, but they just kind of have a little bit more local kind of sense and just kind of more like they kind of tend to go to the nightlife and nightclubs more than Marilyn Manson kind of did. Marilyn Manson had a lot more kind of looming and just ominous kind of cuts, but they kind of are like a mixture of like, especially White Zombie. Like I like Rob Zombie's stuff, but he kind of does more metal lurchers. And I would say that White Zombie just had a lot more club music. So it's just kind of a blend of like Marilyn Manson and White Zombie, just with that craze kind of hookiness that they do have some good hooks on here that just really work well. So it just kind of has that, any way you slice it in terms of nightlife, house parties, raves, pubs, nightclubs, some of those type senses, dance type stuff as far as that kind of goes. This really has that good pitch. But to talk about the 3 songs I didn't enjoy on here, the 3.5. So just to say, I already talked about not enjoying The End of War, but Paralyzed and Take the Pain Away. Paralyzed, even though it had William Control on there, was just another bad example of a power ballad, kind of like End of the War. Both of these just were trying to have like haunting kind of acoustic licks and kind of similar. Like when I think of Korn, I can't really think of too many power ballads by Korn or folks similar to Korn that kind of nail off like the ghoulish kind of haunting kind of music, but then can do it in like a power ballad sense. And I just didn't see that convincement on these particular songs on here. It just didn't quite have the affability as far as trying to do it. I mean, they were at least gloomy and did kind of have like a haunting kind of pitch, but I just question like the composition of getting like some power ballads that just were kind of lighter and just didn't have the sheer kind of crazed energy, because I just think there should have been more riffs in like those power ballads. Probably would have made it be a little bit better. I mean, I know it's a ballad, but I just look after it, I didn't see like the arrangement behind it. But then Take the Pain Away was kind of a song to get you excited, but that one just didn't do its justice. Take the Pain Away was trying to be a song to get you excited and that type of stuff. Definitely had some thundering kind of riffs and that sort of stuff. Definitely one for getting ready to step out and have. Definitely was one for getting ready to step out as far as that's kind of concerned. Not quite at the nightclub and at the rave and some of those type moments, but just in the process of getting there, just being excited as far as that kind of goes. But I just looked after it. The riffs were just not quite as thunderous and as catchy. I mean, Davey Suicide definitely has some great guitar work on here. Definitely has some great guitar work on here and instrumentation as far as that kind of goes. But this is just one where the riffs were thunderous on here and loud and kind of somewhat engaging. Just were not quite as catchy and as addictive as like some of the ones where they're more in the sheer of the midst of what they were doing. So just in terms of the excitement being there already, they nailed it. But in terms of bringing the excitement, I just didn't quite see it as much. So that's just kind of the thing. But to talk about, so what I'm going to score this album, I'm going to give this album me liking 9.5 songs out of 13. I'm going to go ahead and give this album like a 9.5 out of 10. Because if I had liked just a little bit more of like, if I had liked the song Anti-System Revolution a little bit more, if I wasn't on the fence about that one, I would have given this album like a 10 out of 10. But I feel like just between not liking the intro and not liking 3 songs and then not liking, kind of being on the fence about Anti-System Revolution, gets a 9.5. That's still pretty damn good. I mean, Davey Suicide's roundup of the albums I've reviewed thus far by them has been pretty sheer in terms of what I've liked by them. So they have a pretty hit track record, I would have to say. So it's definitely kind of the concept. 4-hit or 3-hit singles, good, lots of radio ready stuff on here, lots of good nightlife, just lots of excellent moments for kind of stepping out and just having a good carnivorous time. Just some minor complaints that don't really detract that much, but it's just kind of the fact that they are low key. They don't have like the sheer exposure that they probably need, but I would have to say, just in the concept of it, that there is some good moments. They are kind of low key and they don't have like the sheer exposure that I would probably say that they need, but I just look after it just being able to say that there's enough kind of hit potential here to be able to say that you should be able to buck that sort of process. So that leads me to like the social score. The social score, I'll go ahead and give a 10 out of 10 just because I feel like it's just that acclaimed. The only reason why I wouldn't give it a 10 is just because it's so low key and I don't know if these singles charted, but in terms of the vividness, of the socialness that they were trying to convey, like I said, this is a social album for multiple things, not just nightclubs, not just dance clubs, that type of stuff, but just for shindigs and festivals and things like that and barbecues. There's plenty of good moments. It's kind of a miniature summer album, so there are some moments for stepping out, I would have to say. So it does do a pretty excellent job of being social. It's not just like the backyard kind of drink sessions and that type of stuff, but just other things besides that, I would have to say. So in terms of the future, like I was saying before, Davey Suicide's been gone since early 2020. So they've been gone since early 2020. So hopefully we'll get some more stuff from them. But this is a pretty excellent album here.